commiserated my 60th birthday this summer, and I first
Oh, there he is.
valued
Yes, I know.
a house 42 years ago in
You
Berwick,
need to be able to
and I
hear
was
him.
just over 18 years of age, doing my degree in estate management down in Newcastle. So I've been looking at property now for 40 odd years, and born and bred in the northeast of Northumberland, and started based in Gosford since 1984, 85. So some 39 years in Gosford. We as a company mostly sell houses. We also oversee a managed portfolio of about 110, which is a fairly high-end value. We don't deal with student lets. Short-term tenancies of 6 months and above. We sell at an average price of about £450,000, so our sales market is not representing the average in the region either. But we also represent a large proportion of new home sales. So we have a balance between those investors who bought from me a number of times on new home schemes, and regular clients selling, and some letting through us, either tenant find or fully managed. We tend to act for a lot of the fully managed and the larger houses in the area, dealing with the likes of footballers and other people who are high-end renters. Indeed, we checked in one rental tenant recently at a magnificent £17,000 per calendar month. So I'm sure a lot of the landlords would love to receive that rental per month, but it had its challenges as well.
Yeah, I'm sure we'd all quite happily have a £17,000 a month rental. So Duncan, so admitting that you aren't necessarily a letting specialist, but property is definitely your thing. Sorry, can just 2 seconds. Michael, Margaret, can you stay on mute, please? People keep coming off mute. Yeah, Duncan, you might have to unmute yourself again. I've clicked mute all. So obviously we're in a slightly unusual position, I'll just say politically, not trying to talk politics, but is it worth covering off what you think people might be thinking when they're looking at property at the moment, whether they're renting or buying?
Well, we've had a very strange period over the last 4 years after COVID, because COVID generated a very false market. I've never seen the likes of it in the summer of 2020 after COVID released us all to work again. And we had something like 400% of normal demand for people trying to buy or rent a property, which was colossal. By the summer of 2022, that market was still strong. We were selling very well. But Liz Truss's government really did cause some harm, because that instant rise of interest rates to 6% had an instant impact on the confidence of people moving. And that caused some difficulties. And it wasn't until the beginning of this year that we saw that market ease a bit, because last year was poor. Confidence was down and demand was down. By the spring of this year, we were trading well, and that's continued through till about July, when the new government, I mean, for the first time in an election, and all the elections we had in the sort of 2010 through to 2017, elections can cause us quite a bit of harm. This year, there was no difference in the trade whatsoever. Everybody knew what the outcome was going to be. Everyone understood it and just got on with it. And we didn't really get the ripple or after effect of the election until July of this year, when they started making grand statements about wait and see what we do to you in the budget in October, because you were going to really penalise people and we're going to get somewhere towards getting this 22 billion that we need. And that was rather foolish, because it just knocked people's confidence in the summer, some 3-4 months before the budget was due to be announced. And that's caused difficulties. I think this last month in September, a number of my clients have sort of got over it and decided that the confidence levels in July and August were so poor that offers were well down, especially at the higher values where people were uncertain. But people with holiday homes, second homes, capital gains problems, corporation tax, they always said they were going to leave. but other kinds of inheritance tax.
No, the microphone.
A lot of people are very worried about that, and a lot of people concerned that we're going to be severely taxed in the budget in the next 2 weeks' time. So we're waiting to see what happens. But it certainly caused a significant ripple over the summer of this year, which is impacted on the sales market.
So you have people waiting to see what's going to happen. Then is that?
Yeah, and we've lost 10% of our holiday homes market. I mean, peaks that we were achieving up the Northumberland coast of 560, 70, 80 up in Beadnell have now dropped to 530, 40, and that's happened in 3 months. That's a 10% drop from the peaks we were getting earlier this year.
What's led to that? Do you think, Duncan? Because of course the Tory government ended the holiday let rules.
Holiday let rules, potential extra taxation, the council tax, and concerns about how the gain on a capital gain on a holiday home
make it work.
So lots of things.
You keep a microphone.
Yeah, Duncan, can you give me a second? Michael, Margaret, can you hear me? I think they can't hear, so they keep unmuting. Sorry, I'll keep muting them as much as I can. I think they're clicking the microphone to try and hear us, not realizing that we can hear them. So the Airbnb market. Do you think the changes to the tax rules, or just the fact that they're basically abolishing the tax special exemptions for holiday lets is having an impact then?
Yes, I mean, the rental market never had it so good. I mean, people who were renting properties and holiday homes in 2020, 21 had the lowest levels of voids they've ever had, the highest occupancy rate, and the surge in demand led to very greedy landlords taking advantage of that. Difficult to say very greedy, because then the day you're just doing what the market forces dictate. And if you used to get peaks for a 2-bedroom flat of 800, 850 a week in July and August, and all of a sudden you're being offered 1,000, 1,100, well, so be it. And that's what happened in 2020 and 21. The huge income was tremendous, and people were actually stopping the sale of their holiday homes because they said their rental income was too great, and they would only allow it to go through in October once the high seasons were over and they were cooling down for the autumn. So we had a lot of excess pricing in 2020, 21, which then reversed over 22 and 23. And there's a lot of people now sitting on holiday homes which no longer are worth the 10% premium we would have got from 2-3 years ago.
Well, I can't do any more.
And they're not getting the rents in that they used to get, nor the number of weeks let.
Yeah.
So the yield on the investments is lowered. But it was false anyway. It was never normal in 2021.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it sounds like they rode the crest for a while and now it's back where it was, rather than it's disappeared.
But overall, when I look back over my career and I look at the likes of the 55 degrees north development and Swan House Roundabout, as it used to be in Newcastle over the Tyne Bridge there, we sold that for a record profit for the developers.
Well, there were some
those one-bed flats used to be 495. They're now 750. The 2-bed flats used to be,
I really don't.
700. They're now 950.
I have got the microphone switched on now.
Duncan, just give us a second. I can't actually do anything about it. I don't know how to manage this on Teams.
Well, if you mute us all, I'll unmute me.
I know, but that's not working. We'll do that again. We'll have another go. Right. So, Duncan, we've got some. We talked about holiday lets. I mean, is it worth talking about just normal trends then? You've said that obviously people aren't buying in the same way. What do you think's coming? Obviously, we've got a budget in a couple of weeks, which will either scare people senseless or it'll give them the confidence to crack on. I mean, what if you had to guess?
No, it's on again.
Duncan, you're on mute.
The fundamental problem that people don't talk about enough, Martin, is how this shortage of supply came about. And really, it goes back to the financial crash in 2007. after that, when the builders were due to build so many houses over the following 6-7 years, we had a record low on those builds.
Well, there's
So
nothing
we
more I
had
can do. I don't
new
think.
units were record low.
I've tried my darndest with
Yes.
this
Okay.
bloody
We-
thing,
we
and I'm
had-
trying to cook 2 meals.
We had people living longer. We had migration issues creating larger numbers. We had people splitting up and family homes dividing up. So the demand for extra homes increased dramatically. And then you added in the horrendous Grenfell Tower, which led to the EWS1 forms that have been
See, the
needed, and so
microphone
many
is now
blocks of
switched on.
flats being
I
unsaleable.
don't have this problem when I do a
Only
Zoom.
recently have we taken out some of those blocks of flats
This is not
because we've
Zoom.
managed to get an EWS1
Oh,
form.
I see.
Oh, just a minute.
And that's affected several thousands of flats in city centres, anything over 4 stories. So, you have your tower blocks that were stopped from selling. You had city centre restrictions on
Can you please stop that?
supply. And
No, I don't
quite
need
frankly, a
to.
lot of people, handing the
I've already
keys
done
back
it.
in.
No.
So, the supply of properties were falling at a large rate.
Oh.
Demand was increasing. And over a period of 10 years, we haven't replaced that demand. And only recently, the last 3 years, have I been informed Lichfields do quite a lot of good work in statistical advice. And in the last 3 years, I think they said the region needed 6,000 dwellings, and the councils have hit that level. But then they've looked at what the criteria has been for the 6,000, and they've admitted that that criteria is underestimated and it should be more like 12,000. So we still have in our region an annual deficit of maybe 5,000 or 6,000 dwellings made available per annum. That's going to take some time to catch up because the builders won't build them that quickly, and we won't get those extra units back for some time. So your shortage of stock, whether it is for sale or whether it's for rent, is continuing to be a major pressure point. And that's why there's extra demand, because every time we do put something on, the prices rise. The best and final offer scenario is still going on normal family homes in prime areas, good residential areas. And same with rentals. We half the time we don't get the chance to properly put it on to a Rightmove site because we've got so many tenants lined up for it already.
No, you by your own ambition, you're not the largest letting agent.
No.
Do you have any thoughts on the renters reform bill?
Well, it's a massive shock, and it's when you look at the detail, 226 pages or whatever it is, it's certainly swaying quite concisely over to the tenant, more so than perhaps it should. I think it's bringing us back to the reality of that an investment yield and an investment property needs to be a medium and long-term one. And we need to put the property into good order at the beginning. We need to choose very carefully and select and qualify your tenant very carefully. There's a huge onus on that now, getting the tenant selection right, making sure the references are right, making sure they're going to look after it. Because if they don't, you're going to have problems. There's going to be so much, the tenant, I gather on day 2 can give the landlord 2 months notice to get out after 4 months. Now, the landlord can't give any notice till after 12 months, and then they've got to give 4 months. And it's those sort of things that make it quite frightening. So it's vitally important that we choose the right person to occupy our homes at the beginning at a fair rent, which everyone's happy with, and we treat it as a medium and longer term investment. And if that's what it is, great. It can still work for all parties, but there has to be greater urgency on the agent, the landlord and the tenant all working together to make the match more long-term happy. And we must be very careful how we select.
Duncan, you may not have seen this, but we had Ed Foster, sorry, someone can correct me on this name there, from Newcastle Council speaking at one of our events recently. And he basically said about the rollout of licensing across Newcastle that, the expectation was that landlords would not take what I will call, my words, bad tenants. So I raised the question to him and said, well, if every property needs a license and nobody's allowed a bad tenant, what do bad tenants do? And I jokingly suggested maybe they should move to Sunderland. But like, joking aside on that, do you think we're going to have an issue where people just aren't going to be able to get houses because landlords will be all that extra careful because of the uncertainties?
Yes. If I was a private landlord renting out, I'd want to be very, very clear who my tenant was, and I'd want to do very extensive checks. I mean, we put some of ours now out to a proper tenant referencing agency who does a very good job for us, and we get a comprehensive document back on that character. But we also do further checks ourselves to go back through some of their previous rentals and just find out exactly who they are, especially at the higher values. Once we're starting to talk serious money, then it can be a horrendous experience if it goes wrong from the beginning. But we've got very good inventory clerks. We've got very good video reels. We can prove the standard and the condition. But we know that the deposit isn't enough to look after that. We know that we've got, at the end of the day, make an informed decision with our client, the landlord, to make sure that everybody thinks it's a good risk. But that's why we don't deal in that end of the market, because it's too risky, in my view. There are too many Walter Mitty's around. I mean, I see it not just in lets, but I see it in sales. People make up and fraudulently create documents which are not true. And I don't want to be part of that. It's too much like hard work.
Yeah. When we chatted briefly before we started, you said there were still legacy issues from 2008. Have we covered that again, or did you have anything else you wanted to say on that?
No, it's just the shortage of stock, full stop, and we've not seen the builders build. I mean, we are waiting for 5-6 significant sites. I mean, one of them down in North Shields, which we should have had 300 or 400 units built out on the former dock at Smithstock. Another big one at Hebburn and Jarrow, which has got 200-300 units coming, and fundamental problems in conversions and brownfield regeneration, which just don't stack up. The Prudhoe Hospital was an old Victorian hospital. The new land around the grounds were easy to develop, and that went up very well and sold out very easily. But the actual the conversion element of it, because of the planning, had to be sold for £0. And even now it doesn't stack up, because the conversion costs are far in advance of the sales values. And you've got that happening on a number of sites throughout the region where the site just doesn't stack up, and you've got to go back for planning. And this new government said they will build. Well, they've got to do that. They've got to break down some of these old planning guidelines. They've got to create new opportunities, and they've got to get planning back into a position whereby we can build at a price that's affordable. Because we know until the cost of materials comes down that the pricing, I mean, a build cost now used to be £150, £200 a square foot. We used to talk about that. It's now, most of my builders I'm in touch with are £300 to £400 a square foot, or £3,000 to £4,000 a square meter. It's significantly large. It's double pretty much, and that's happened in 5 years. So where does your land value go? Where does your profit go? If you're a developer, you need to create more homes. So we're going to have to build some of those things that, and the limitations and the Section 106s and the cost of carrying out some of these build programs is just too high, and that's why the sites haven't been developed.
Yeah. What do you say to people who are getting into development and Duncan? Because I'm sure in Gosforth where you are, I know people who've looked at old pubs, old care homes, old hospitals, maybe not hospitals, but in the kind of go, oh, this will be a great one. And then, of course, they struggle to get it off the ground. I mean, if a large-scale builder can't convert an old hospital, what needs to happen then? Do you think we need to just accept we will lose those old buildings and they'll be demolished to make it, or
they're going to have to increase the numbers of bed sits and 1 beds and 2 beds. Especially if an old building only had 1 or 2 window reveals, that dictates. I mean, especially down in the quayside, a lot of the old mills down there, were basically full of brick behind the front window or the feed arch or whatever it was that was coming out of the mill, and the old depositories and the likes. So window reveals that weren't there historically dictated how many beds. And you had instances on a lot of the developments down the quayside where a 700, 800, 900 square foot unit only had one bedroom because there was only 2 window reveals, 1 living room and 1 bedroom. So you couldn't have internal. They're going to have to break that down and allow different shafts and different windows and change the planning policy. And that's going to have to happen in a number of areas. They're going to have to be more flexible if they're truly going to allow numbers to increase again. Because at the moment, we haven't got anything like the numbers coming through that we need to satisfy demand. And as I said earlier, those numbers that Nathaniel Litchfield and other planning specialists have been quoted have been hit by Newcastle and other regional councils, but they're now questioning whether the target was accurate because they think they've underestimated by as much as 6,000 per annum. So, 6,000 per annum is a big shortfall.
Or quite a small area.
Yes, that's just our region. I mean, the Northeast, I'm sick of seeing tables that quote the Northeastern Wales, which is the poorest or the smallest in terms of the pounds per square foot or the number of units or the shortfall for this. But then again, we don't get the extremes. We don't get the high swings and we don't get the troughs and the peaks. But we certainly as a region need to prosper more. But then it was a region we have to accept where we have a heavy reliance on the public sector workforce. I mean, some parts of Morpeth, I think, are close to 50-odd% of public sector reliance. And as a region, we've been talking 30, 40 years now about the likes of Sage or Nissan or Barber or, where are the new industries? Where are the new mass employers with big salaries? We still rely on relatively small numbers of people employing us.
Yeah. Duncan, we've got some questions and I can see that Gloria has her hand up. Gloria, do you want to go first with your question there, please? You can type it or you can unmute. Don't know where Gloria's gone. Anyone see or hear Gloria? Go back to Gloria. We did get some questions submitted in advance, Duncan. So what is the difference in strategy when looking to buy a property to live in as opposed to a rental?
Rentals, people will make do and they will reduce their long-term standards and aspirations. They're grateful in many cases to have an opportunity to get somewhere that is suitable. It doesn't have to be the place they want to live long term, but it should be a place they want to live in for at least 12 months, not the 6 months we've been thinking about and used to. We've got to have tenants who are going to be comfortable there for at least 12 months. But there is a long-term purchase of a home they're going to live in is usually subject to a lot more conditions and restrictions than a tenancy. If the unit is 70-80% right for them, they'll be very grateful to take it because they're not going to get much any. It's not a huge alternative choice.
Yeah. Next one. I don't know if we've covered the Renters Reform Bill, but what positives can you find from the Renters Reform Bill? So I'll give you 10 words on this because we covered it. But what are the positives, do you think?
Security for medium and long-term investment. Yields of 7 to 8%, which should be higher than interest rates are.
So just taking the excitement out of the market.
Medium and long-term view. If you're happy at 7 to 8% and you've got a good tenant, put all your efforts into selecting the right tenant. Spend all of the time checking that you are 100% as highly competent and that you believe that this tenant would be right for you.
Yeah.
But you certainly need to be involved with the agent to check that tenant out and look into all the background checks. It's
a good job you're allowed to charge fees to cover all the additional work, isn't it? That's a joke there. Duncan, do estate agents, a lot of people probably have always wondered this one, do estate agents have their preferred list of buyers that they send their good deals to before they hit the market? And if so, how do you get on that list?
There is an element of truth in that, because your vendor will often say to you, especially at the moment, 1 in 4 vendors will say to us, please don't give me 20, 30, 40 people through my house. Give me your best 5, give me your best 10. And for those price levels, which are very popular, and you've got multiple offers coming in, they don't want, an open day with huge numbers coming through. They want the best. So we will pre-qualify, and a buyer who proves they've got cash, a buyer who is actively looking, a buyer who is regularly in touch with us, has got a mortgage in principle, has done all the documents, and is really keen, we're going to phone them before others, because we know they want to move and they'll not waste our clients' time. So we do, every buyer gets graded, whatever system you use on your software gets graded from applicants 1, 2, 3, 4. But it's not always the buyer who can proceed the quickest is the best, because rather frustratingly, we could have a very good buyer for a property around the corner who's got a house to sell, but has a really popular house, which we know would go under offer next week, and they might pay you a bit more. And our job is to get the best price possible. And if the client wants it and they're happy to go public, we will go public and achieve the best possible price. And that will only be really known from best and final offers, which is hopeless for buyers. It's a terrible thing. Great for the vendor, but best and finals is not nice to be part of. But it's a way of resolving an issue when you've got too many people for a house, or the prices are rising, like we've seen with low supply and high demand. And when you've got the circumstances, whether it's for sale or to let, those letting properties, so many landlords have for many years put up with, it's a great tenant, he never gives me any harm, I'll take the 650 a month from him. And that 650 can now be 850 or 900. And you really need to get it updated, because we can find you another great tenant, but you might have become emotionally attached to the canny person you've got in there now. There's a lot to be said for that. I'm not encouraging you to gazump with a new tenant, because you might not get as good a one again. But the values have changed dramatically over the last 3 years, both for sale and let.
Bruce is typing all kinds in here. Bruce, I'm not sure if these are questions, observations, or just rants. Not against you, Duncan, sorry, against the council by the looks of it. But it looks like he's jumped in and said it looks like the licensing across the city has been introduced, it's been passed and will be introduced. Your Homes Newcastle have come in for a slating today for substandard properties. Dominic, I presume your question's for Bruce rather than Duncan, but are Newcastle Council still taking their social housing back? Don't know, that's probably not for you, Duncan. Oh, Bruce has answered that. Yeah, sorry, they're just having a side chat. Gloria, however, has typed her question in. I want to build on a greenfield site, modular buildings. I've had a look at the local plan. There is a lot of charges taken by the council. This is new to me. Is this a viable thing to do? Don't know if there's any more info there, if you've got enough to go with, Duncan.
To build on greenfield, you've got to have a degree of hope value for the future, because some greenfields will have to change. And that's what this government has said. They will bring in extra land. They'll first of all target brownfield and regeneration land, but greenfield options will be considered. So some greenfield sites on the edge of settlements at the moment will have to break and will have to go. But otherwise, to get planning on a greenfield site now, it's got to be a, what's it called, a special, it's got a name, special one-off house in an individual unique spot, which is built to the highest of sustainable standards. Section something house, section whatever. Section
this is why you see these underground houses with glass roofs and things like that. That kind of, yeah.
I call them Teletubbies houses. Houses that are just completely one-off. But we see a lot of those now, which are not so individually and not so odd. We see a lot of barns now built as brand new, but they look like a barn from the outside. And they've been sunken into the ground and they've got fantastic recoveries. And we've got quite a few houses where the running costs are maybe £50 a month. Now, I've got a 1930s suburban semi in Newcastle, and I shockingly paid as much as £700 a month for the gas and electricity here.
Yeah.
And there's a 6,000-7,000 square foot newly built barn which has got complete recovery in electricity, water, and power generation and heat, and it's being run for £50 a month. There's a lot to be said for a new build now, and when we first brought out energy performance certificates, nobody really cared or looked at them. A lot of people look at them now. A running cost of a house now is a significant cost. It's like a mortgage.
Yeah. Duncan, thank you very much. I think we've gone a couple of minutes over what we planned. That's been fantastic. We've got last question has snuck in here from Louise. Are you finding that some vendors are unrealistic about the value of their property and believe they are worth more than they are? Would you only market if they agree to your market value? Would you list, or would you list and steer the vendor's expectation?
I think at least 40, if not 50% of the market still prices higher than you expect. I don't want to pick out Darras Hall, but I will mention Darras Hall purely because our local manager bought up there and a couple of other footballers. And people always tell me about what they paid or what the one-off person paid and how much that is pounds per square foot. And I say, fine, get me another manager, get me another footballer, get me somebody else who's got money to burn, because they're not the norm. And last year, our company, I think we probably valued 40 or 50 houses, even around the Ponteland area, which came on with other agents at figures, typically 1.4, 1.5, 1.6 million was our valuation, came on at 2.25. Those houses are now down to 1.75, but they've been on the market for a year. We do refuse, we try not to. If the client is being over optimistic by maybe 10 or 15%, we will go along with them and do our best, because you can never, I've learned over 40 years, you can never say it's not worth, because valuation is subjective to personal taste. And regularly I do see prices being achieved which are well beyond what I thought the mass would pay, because comparable evidence and competitive cost evidence is what you would normally use to value a place. Every now and then you get a client who pays more. So, valuation is unique to the person who wants it. But yes, we are still seeing large sections of the market overpriced, far too ambitious. It won't sell. It'll come down eventually, by which time you've done considerable harm to that house. And yes, we do occasionally go along with the public's request and try and get the value down if it doesn't sell afterwards.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Duncan. That's great. We are going to move on to Mark. I'm going to